Welcome to Shared Reading. Today we're going to be reading an exciting story about a boy named Peter Pan. As we're reading this story, I want us to think about the essential question of how do we reveal ourselves to others. In this super fun story, we've got great characters. I want you to think about how do the characters reveal themselves to each other. All right? Continue on to hear the fabulous story. Today, as we read, we're going to focus on identifying the key events in this story and be able to create a summary as we read. Beloved, follow along as I read the story Come Away, an excerpt from the novel Peter and Wendy by J.M. Barrie. The well-known character Peter Pan, the adventurous boy from Neverland who refuses to grow up, first began his literary life in a 1902 novel for adults. Then he found fame in a 1904 play called Peter Pan, which was turned into a successful children's fantasy novel, Peter and Wendy, in 1911. Next came a Broadway musical, a TV movie, and an animated film about Peter, which made his character even more popular. In this chapter, early in the novel, Peter and the fairy Tinkerbell fly into the bedroom of a young girl named Wendy Darling, who lives in London, England. They are in search of Peter's shadow, which they left behind on a recent secret visit. Note how the narrator in the following passage from chapter 3 sometimes interrupts the storytelling, addressing the reader directly. There was another light in the room now, 1,000 times brighter than the night lights. And in the time we have taken to say this, it had been in all the drawers in the nursery, looking for Peter's shadow, rummaged the wardrobe, and turned every pocket inside out. It was not really a light, as it made this light by flashing about so quickly. But when it came to rest for a second, you saw it was a fairy, no longer than your hand, but still growing. It was a girl called Tinkerbell, who was exquisitely gowned in a skeleton leaf. A moment after the fairy's entrance, the window was blown open by the breathing of the little stars, and Peter dropped in. He had carried Tinkerbell part of the way, and his hand was still messy with the fairy dust. Tinkerbell, he called softly, after making sure the children were asleep. Tink, where are you? She was in a jug for the moment, and liking it extremely. She had never been in a jug before. Oh, do come out of that jug and tell me, do you know where they put my shadow? The loveliest tinkle of the golden bells answered him. It was the fairy language. You ordinary children can never hear it, but if you were to hear it, you would know that you've heard it before. Tink said that the shadow was in the big box. She meant the chest of drawers, and Peter jumped at the drawers, scattering their contents to the floor with both hands as kings toss halfpence to the crowd. In a moment, he had recovered his shadow, and in his delight, he forgot that he had shut Tinkerbell up in the drawer. If he had thought at all, but I don't believe he ever thought. It was that he and his shadow, when brought near each other, would join like drops of water. And when they did that, he was appalled. He tried to stick it on with soap from the bathroom, but that also failed. A shudder passed through Peter, and he sat on the floor, cried. His sobs woke Wendy, and she sat up in bed. He was not alarmed to see a stranger crying on the nursery floor. He was only pleasantly interested. "Boy," she said courteously, "why are you crying?" Peter could be exceedingly polite also, having learned the grand manner at fairy ceremonies, and he rose and bowed to her beautifully. She was much pleased and bowed beautifully to him from the bed. "What's your name?" he asked. "Wendy Miura Angela Darling," she replied with some satisfaction. "What is your name?" "Peter Pan." She was already sure that he must be Peter, but it did seem a comparatively short name. "Is that all?" "Yes," he said rather sharply. He felt for the first time that it was a short-ish name. While I was reading, I found some pretty important details or events that happened to let me understand what's been going on in the story. So first off, in that first paragraph, that background information, it let me know that Peter and Tink flew to Wendy's room to look for Peter's shadow. So I not only underlined that, but I also put it in my own words up this side. When the story started, it had said that Tink was in the room first looking for the shadow, and I knew that because it said it had been in all the drawers looking for Peter's shadow. So for the summary for this page, I was able to write, Peter and Tink are looking for Peter's shadow. That is mainly what happened on this page. As we continued reading, I was able to find more key events. Like Peter locks Tink in a drawer after finding the shadow, and he tries to stick it on with soap. Silly Peter. I also found out that Wendy woke up because Peter was crying a whole bunch. I want you now to write in the box that says summary, how can you put these key details in your own words to create a summary for this page? Think about it. What do you predict will happen next? We know Peter and Tinkerbell were trying to find Peter's shadow, finally found it and tried to stick it on with soap. He started to cry because it didn't happen, and Wendy woke up. She started making fun of his name, though, saying it was pretty short. What do you think will happen next? Let's read tomorrow to find out.